What if I told you the first great prison break didn't happen on earth, but in heaven? Long before kingdoms rose and fell, before the mountains had names and oceans had borders, the skies above were not just a canvas of stars. They were a battlefield, a prison, a divine holding cell for beings too powerful, too dangerous to be allowed among us. These were no ordinary spirits. They were the fallen angels, once radiant, now wrapped in shadow, cast out of glory not just for disobedience, but for a rebellion that shook the very fabric of creation. The Bible hints at their fall. The book of Enoch whispers their secrets. But what most people don't realize is, they didn't stay locked away forever. And when they broke free, it wasn't chaos, it was calculated. A celestial revolt, timed to perfection, disguised as a meteor shower in ancient skies. Humanity looked up and saw beauty. They never realized they were witnessing an invasion. This is not just a story about angels. It's a story about us. Because what escaped that night didn't just fall to earth. It wove itself into our cultures, our beliefs, our fears. It wore human names. It sat on thrones. It whispered in dreams. And the question we must ask is not what happened then, but what is still happening now, right now. Because if darkness once escaped the heavens, then perhaps, just perhaps, it's still trying to rule from the shadows. Let's uncover the story they tried to erase. The prison, the plan, the war, and the angels who dared to fight back. In the beginning, when the earth was still cloaked in mist and time itself had not yet taken shape, there was something strange about the sky. It stretched out endlessly, draped in blue by day and scattered with lights by night. But if you looked closely, closer than any eye dared to see, you would realize something unsettling. The sky wasn't just sky. It was a cage, a prison crafted not by human hands, but by divine will. Not made of iron, but of light and shadow. Not closed by locks, but by holy decrees and cosmic seals. You see, the heavens once trembled with war, and when a third of the stars fell, when the angels of old rebelled against the order of creation, not all were cast into the deep abyss. Some were bound in the air itself, held between dimensions, suspended above the world like thunder waiting to break. The Bible calls them the Watchers. The book of Enoch gives them names: Azazel, Semjaza, Arachiel. But we only ever saw the surface of the story. The truth was wrapped in cloud and silence. Their prison wasn't visible to the naked eye. It hovered between the folds of heaven, hidden in plain sight. And while people walked the earth, built cities, sang songs beneath the moon, they never realized they were living under the ceiling of a cosmic penitentiary. Have you ever stared at the stars and felt watched? Perhaps it's because you were. These ancient beings, these fallen ones, were not sleeping. They were watching, thinking, planning. Their hatred grew colder and more refined with every century. The spiritual net that held them was complex. It didn't just bind their forms. It choked their influence, dampened their whispers, made their names forgotten. But not gone. In the spiritual realm, distance is not measured in miles, but in memory, in worship, in fear. And so long as mankind remembered them in myth, feared them in dreams, or called them by accident in rituals, they lingered, pressing against the walls of their cage. Now you might ask, why would God place them there? why not cast them into total destruction? Because even judgment has purpose. Their punishment wasn't annihilation, it was containment. A lesson to others, a warning to the heavens, and maybe, just maybe, a mercy. Even in his wrath, the Lord is just. Even when he binds, he leaves room for redemption, or at least remembrance. But here's where the story begins to twist. We often picture angels as beings of light, wings outstretched, faces glowing, voices echoing praise. And many are. But imagine for a moment a being that once stood in that glory, now stripped of it, burning not with holiness, but with vengeance. And imagine that being staring down through the veil of the sky, watching your world, envying your freedom. That's what the sky held. Not clouds. Not stars. Chains. Have you ever heard a thunderclap that shook something deep inside you? Or seen a shooting star that felt like more than just a falling rock? Some cultures called them omens. Others said they were messengers. A few whispered they were signs of war. They weren't wrong, because from time to time, something would rattle the cage. A cosmic tremor, a solar alignment, a blood moon. And in those moments, the prison strained. The ancients called it the time of trembling stars. It was more than poetic, it was prophetic. Something was waking. One of the most haunting truths in Scripture is that not everything God has locked away will stay away forever. Revelation speaks of an angel being given the key to the bottomless pit. Jude mentions chains of darkness until the day of judgment. And Enoch? Enoch names them, describes them, warns us, but who was listening? That's the real tragedy. In our modern world, we've made the sky small. We've turned it into a place of satellites and forecasts. But long ago, the sky was a realm, a border, a spiritual frontier. The ancients knew this. They built ziggurats, towers, altars pointing upward, not just to worship, but to warn, because they understood the sky was not to be trusted. Now imagine being one of those beings. Imagine remembering the light you once bathed in, the songs you once sang in the courts of heaven, the authority you once held, now reduced to a shadow, shackled by divine light, forgotten by heaven, feared by earth. Your name erased from glory, your voice echoing only through the hollow spaces of wind and storm. Would you accept that fate? They didn't. They waited, and that is the beginning of something much darker. Because when a prison strains for too long, it either breaks or bends. And these beings? They learned to bend the rules, whisper through dreams, tap into rituals, use symbols, align with stars. Until one day, the cage would tremble not from judgment, but from something else entirely. But that we'll get to soon. For now, remember this. The sky above you has stories it's never told. And the next time you look up at the night, ask yourself not what's out there, but who's still watching from behind the veil. Let's now explore what happened when the stars began to shake. They say the stars don't lie. But what if the stars weren't just telling a story? What if they were the story? What if those streaks of fire across the night sky were not burning rocks falling through the atmosphere, but the desperate escape of imprisoned minds, slipping through a fracture in their cosmic cage? It happened in a moment that no astronomer could predict. The ancients called it the time of trembling stars, a name passed down in hushed tones, found carved into stone tablets long lost beneath the sands of forgotten civilizations. There are echoes of it in Mesopotamian hymns, in Egyptian priestly scrolls, even in the apocalyptic passages of Enoch. A rare celestial alignment, so precise, so fragile, created a ripple in the fabric of that divine prison. Not a break, but a bruise. Not a hole, but a hairline fracture. And for those who had been waiting, it was enough. 200 of the most cunning, the most ancient, the most wrathful among the fallen recognized the sign. Their minds, imprisoned yet still pulsing with wicked intelligence, coordinated with the precision of angels who once knew perfect harmony. Without speaking, without sound, they acted. They tore open a breach. Not with swords, not with brute strength, but with vibration. Resonance. Ancient tones no human ear could hear. Patterns traced into the ether. Spiritual pressure applied in unison, aimed like a battering ram against the weakest point of their confinement. And just like that, the seal gave way. The sky cracked, not in the way clouds break for rain, but like glass under strain. And through that wound in the firmament, they poured, not in flesh and blood, but in fire and shadow, in glory corrupted. Their descent was seen by early humanity, scattered and afraid, who looked up and saw trails of fire slicing across the heavens. They fell like meteor storms, waves of burning essence lighting up the dark. And humanity, innocent and unaware, called them omens. They whispered, "The gods are speaking." But the gods weren't speaking, they were screaming. Not all who escaped survived the passage. The breach was unstable. Many perished in transit, their forms disintegrated into dust and light, leaving behind only rumors in the wind and strange discolorations in the sky. But those who made it through, the few who crossed, descended into the world with a new kind of hunger. They had been watching us for ages. Now they were among us. The earth trembled. Not because of earthquakes, but because power, raw and unnatural, had entered its soil. The balance tilted. Birds flew in the wrong directions. Waters churned without wind. Infants cried in unison at midnight. Even the trees leaned away from their landing sites. And in that moment, humanity changed. These beings didn't announce themselves. They didn't crash into cities or take over temples. They understood that subtlety was more dangerous than violence, so they disappeared into the folds of civilization, carving out influence with whispers, not war cries. Two of them stood above the rest. The first, Oha, chose a name that sounded like safety to the people he deceived. Sam. A name that meant protector, guardian, father. He understood that power disguised as care was irresistible. And so he wrapped himself in robes of nobility, offered wisdom and shelter, and became the god-king of those who feared the dark. But it was him who brought it. The second, Haya, took a slower path. He became Nariman, a name whispered in dreams, appearing in the prayers of rulers and the visions of mystics. He didn't build temples, he built ideas. He planted doubt, he fertilized ambition, and in doing so, he seeded an empire of influence, invisible and yet unshakable. But before we explore their reign, before we watch how these two fallen architects reshape the world from behind their human masks, let's return to the stars for just a moment longer, because something still lingered in the breach. The prison may have cracked, but the heavens didn't forget. The angels above, the ones who remained loyal, who stood guard even as others fell, they saw the breach. They felt the vibration. They knew what had escaped. And so, while mankind was still in awe of these so-called omens, while they built monuments to honor the gods who had come down, a very different kind of preparation began. A gathering, a response. Because heaven does not forget, and heaven always answers. But before the armies of light descend, before the trumpets of judgment sound, there is one more truth you must understand. Evil does not march in chains. It walks in robes. It sings in choirs. It teaches in temples. It leads with a smile. And in the days following the time of trembling stars, it wore the face of your Savior. Now, let's see what happened when Sam and Nariman began to build their kingdoms upon the fear, the faith, and the future of mankind. Sam came first, not because he was the strongest, but because he understood something the others didn't. Power isn't seized by force, it's gifted by fear. And humans, oh how they fear. He descended in the midst of a restless tribe, high atop a ridge where storms often gathered. His arrival was marked by a wind that howled like a chorus of wolves and a flash of lightning that lit the mountains like a crown. They saw him and trembled, but he did not devour them. No, he knelt. Open arms. Gentle voice. He spoke their tongue before they even knew it was theirs. I am Sam, he said. The one who protects. He built no throne. He built walls, massive circular fortresses of stone that rose where clouds kissed the ground. To keep you safe, he promised. From what? He never said. But the people built anyway. With trembling hands they offered their labor, their resources, and eventually their loyalty. And just like that, fear was repackaged into faith. He wore the robes of a guardian, but his eyes told another story. Dark wells that never blinked, reflecting not the people before him, but something far behind them, something ancient, something broken. And yet, they loved him. He healed the sick. He interpreted dreams. He spoke of celestial dangers only he could ward off. And in every ritual he led, a small offering was demanded, a trinket, a drop of blood, a child's name whispered in the smoke. No one questioned it. After all, didn't guardians deserve tribute? Meanwhile, Nariman didn't appear. He emerged. Whispers of his name spread across valleys like a soft wind. He didn't descend in fire, but in dreams, visions carried to kings and prophets and grieving mothers. He planted suggestions like seeds. Build that tower, choose that man, trust this voice. No thunder, no spectacle. Just subtle distortions that bent the will without ever breaking it. He slipped into temples, not as a god, but as a vision. He told leaders their rule was sacred. He told priests their power was divine. He told soldiers their war was holy, and they believed him, because his voice sounded like their own deepest desires. Nariman was not a tyrant. He was a gardener of empires, and he watered his crops with ambition. While Sam ruled from visible hills, Nariman became the spirit in unseen corridors. He had no fortress. He didn't need one. His stronghold was in laws, in symbols, in dreams carved onto stone tablets and sealed in royal rings. He whispered through oracles. He breathed through prophets. And when he spoke, entire cities changed direction. Together, they formed a perfect balance. Sam, the hand of authority. Nariman, the voice in the ear. Their dominion was not built in haste. It was built with patience. Every act of control was dressed in the language of freedom. Every demand for worship sounded like an offer of protection. And slowly, humanity bent, not because it was forced, but because it was convinced. They created systems of tribute, precious metals, livestock, grain, and eventually, people. Sacrifice became sacred. Death became worship. The deeper the offering, the closer you were to divine favor. And those who resisted, they disappeared. Neighbors began informing on each other. Families turned cold. Trust rotted. Communities became surveillance states, not by decree, but by fear, by belief. And perhaps most chilling of all, they encouraged creativity. They did not burn books. They commissioned them. They did not silence artisans. They paid them. But everything created bore their mark. Architecture shaped like wings that weren't quite right. Songs written in minor keys that praised the shadows. Sculptures that twisted beauty into something quietly monstrous. Even progress was weaponized. A new tool, a new way to control, a new system of measurement. A way to tax the soul. A new philosophy, a justification for why the sacrifice was necessary. And no one questioned it, because questioning wasn't punished, it was pitied. How sad, Sam would say, that you fear the gift we've given you. How tragic, Nariman would murmur, that your heart is closed to truth. And that was the brilliance of their control. They didn't demand obedience. They made obedience look like choice. They didn't kill rebellion. They made rebellion seem foolish. They didn't destroy hope. They redefined it. This, perhaps, is the most important lesson from their reign. Not how they rose, but how they ruled. With patience, with psychology, with the understanding that a cage with no bars is the hardest cage to escape. But of course, heaven was not silent. Somewhere beyond the veil, the light stirred. Michael raised his blade. Gabriel gathered her scrolls. Raphael prepared his healing hands. And a fourth, one history almost forgot, began forging weapons in silence. Because the moment was drawing near. The forces of heaven had watched long enough, and when they moved, it would not be in peace. It would be in judgment. Let us now step into the realm of angels and see how light responds to the shadow. The first to descend was Michael, not in fire, not in spectacle, but in silence. He appeared like a golden line drawn across the sky at dawn, a blade of morning light stretching from the throne of God to the war-torn soil of earth. His arrival was not announced by trumpet or thunder. It was marked by stillness. The kind of stillness that settles before a storm breaks. The kind of silence that makes every living creature look up. Michael bore no crown. He bore a burden, the burden of righteous judgment. His eyes, clear as crystal and old as justice, scanned the corrupted lands where Sam had built his strongholds. He saw the altars stained with blood, the towers built on fear, the chants echoing hollow praise. He did not weep. He did not rage. He understood. This was war, not the kind fought with armies alone, but the kind fought over hearts, over truths, over names. He knelt, placed his hand upon the earth, and whispered a command into the dirt. And the ground answered. From distant corners of heaven, 3 more descended. Gabriel came next, cloaked in layers of living scripture. Her every movement shimmered with revelation. words that were not written but were. She didn't bring messages. She was the message. Her light pulsed not like lightning, but like insight. Each beat of her wings peeled back illusions like curtains, revealing the twisted symbols Sam had erected and the secret oaths Nariman had embedded into ancient prayers. Her mission wasn't to fight with swords, but to cut through deception, to drag every lie into the light. Then came Raphael, moving like silver water, weaving through the air like a melody only the soul could hear. Where he passed, sickness recoiled. Pain unraveled. He didn't wear armor. He wore compassion. And yet, his presence burned. He didn't come to heal wounds of the body. He came to restore the image of God in those whose minds had been bent. And last was Istro, not mentioned in the common scrolls, known only to those who listened between the lines. A figure of finality, a flame that did not flicker. He carried no sword. He was the sword, forged not of metal, but of truth sharpened into consequence. His role was not to warn. It was to finish. Together, they did not form an army. They formed a reckoning. They gathered in a place where heaven and earth kissed, a sacred intersection long forgotten by men, preserved only in myth and guarded by winds that carried no scent. Here, the council began. Michael spoke first. His voice did not echo, it settled. They have gone too far. Their roots stretch through the soil of every kingdom. Their shadows touch every crown. We do not strike from vengeance. We strike for the return of balance. Gabriel opened her palms, and images danced across the air. Visions of rituals in darkened rooms, of children marked with seals they did not understand, of kings worshipping the face of a protector who was their jailer. They hide behind language, behind culture, and behind memory itself. We must strike where memory is made. Raphael nodded. And where the broken still breathe, we must prepare a shield. Some can be healed, some can be freed. Istro said nothing. He simply began to forge. Divine weapons, each one glowing with a different hue, each attuned to the specific corruption it would face. Not crude blades, not hammers, but instruments of unmaking, designed to cut not just flesh, but influence, to sever not just bodies, but legacies. As preparations unfolded, they called upon reinforcements. Not just angels, but watchers who had not fallen, ancient spirits of the wind and flame, benevolent guardians of forgotten forests and mountains who had remained hidden from man's gaze, but loyal to the divine order. And slowly, the army of light began to form. But this army did not march with banners. It moved in shadows. It whispered hope to the oppressed. It stirred questions in the minds of the faithful. It appeared in dreams to those ready to resist. And as their numbers grew, so too did the anxiety in Sam's heart, and the tension in Nariman's web. They felt it. The shifting, the watching, the weight of justice descending like dew upon every lie they had crafted. So Sam did what tyrants always do when afraid. He tightened his grip. He called his followers to sacrifice more. He declared new rituals, more sacred hills, higher tributes. He painted his demands in the language of divine urgency. Nariman responded with something more dangerous. He whispered new visions, ones of inevitable war. He seeded paranoia in rulers, conspiracies in the hearts of prophets, and doubt in the sacred books. They are coming for your gods, he warned. They will take your freedom, your truth. And many believed him. Because when the light rises, it often looks at first like judgment. But the angels did not strike immediately. They waited, they listened, they watched as humans stood at the crossroads of choice. Because heaven, even in warfare, still honors the sacredness of the will. And when the moment came, it would not begin with blood, it would begin with truth. Because the battle ahead was not just about reclaiming territory, it was about reclaiming names, souls, stories. And so, with every blade forged, every plan whispered among the righteous, the heavens drew a line, and Earth. Earth stood on the edge of that line. The sky was no longer a prison, it was a gate. And the gates were opening. Now let us walk into the fire, into the first clash of realms, where angels descended not to sing, but to roar. The sky cracked, not with thunder, but with purpose. It began near the highest of Sam's fortresses, a towering monolith built atop a ridge that pierced the clouds like a blade. From below, it looked like a beacon. From above, it looked like a wound. The fortress had long stood as a symbol of dominion, a place where people came not to worship in freedom, but to kneel in fear. It was from here that Sam sent out his decrees. Here he declared himself protector of the earth, guardian of the realm between heaven and man. Here he ruled with light that wasn't light, and words that bent like serpents. But now real light came. Michael descended first, not with fanfare, but with force. His blade didn't flash, it blazed. Golden fire etched with names too holy to speak, burning with righteousness that made stone tremble. He did not speak. He acted. With a single arc of his sword, the outer walls of Sam's fortress, once thought impenetrable, shuddered, cracked, and began to collapse like sand cast into a flood. Sam had no more illusions to hide behind. He emerged from the depths of his citadel, not as a man, not as a protector, but in his true form. A tower of shadow wrapped in flame, eyes like black suns, wings charred and vast. His voice rumbled like the earth groaning under judgment. "You dare," he said. Michael did not answer. He raised his blade again. Elsewhere, Gabriel moved through the cities Nariman had infected. She didn't need to tear down buildings. She tore down veils. Her light pulsed through dreams and temples and secret chambers, revealing the networks Nariman had woven. Priests froze mid-sermon, seeing visions of the lies they'd believed. Kings dropped their scepters as their supposed divine visions unraveled into demonic whispers. Panic spread, not because of chaos, but because clarity had returned. And clarity is always terrifying when you've built your life on illusion. Nariman responded swiftly. From the deep halls of his influence, he unleashed waves of nightmare. Not physical monsters, but psychological warfare. He sent fear itself into the hearts of men. He twisted memories. He turned families against each other. People screamed, not from wounds, but from visions. Terrifying, intimate, surgically designed visions, crafted to fracture faith, sever trust, and paralyze the will. But Raphael was already there. His silver glow moved like breath, covering villages like morning fog. His hands touched minds twisted by fear and restored them. He laid light on dreams corrupted by darkness and remade them whole. His healing was not loud, it was present. And presence is more powerful than panic. He whispered truths that men had forgotten. You were made in light. You are not theirs. You were never meant to be ruled by fear. His words anchored souls like ships caught in a storm suddenly finding harbor. Then came Istro. Where Michael cut, Istro ended. He moved like inevitability. Every strike from his divine weapon, forged from consequence itself, shattered demonic strongholds that had taken centuries to build. He found the pressure points, the spiritual foundations Sam and Nariman had buried beneath blood and ritual, and he split them open. The earth split too. In places where the demons had seeded hybrid forces, half-spirit, half-human horrors born of dark unions, Istro waged war not against the flesh, but against the essence. His blows did not just kill, they cleansed. They separated. They gave Raphael space to heal what remained. Still, Sam fought with fury. His shadow fire surged like a tidal wave. He screamed oaths in languages older than Eden. He struck the sky, darkening it. But Michael stood firm, not because he was stronger, but because he was right. And righteousness cannot be undone. Meanwhile, Gabriel's revelations had done their work. Human agents of Nariman, once loyal, now exposed, began to defect. They saw the light. They remembered their names. And when humans remember who they are, no demon can control them. Nariman's empire cracked from within. Desperate, he attempted one final move. He merged his essence with his most loyal acolytes, creating new beings, twisted hybrids pulsing with corrupted power. These monsters moved fast, unpredictably, crashing into angelic ranks with unnatural fury. For a moment, it worked. But Raphael had been preparing. His healing arts weren't just for recovery, they were weapons of restoration. He touched the twisted, and where others saw monsters, he saw potential. His light reached through the layers of corruption, finding the human within the horror, and pulled it back. Slowly, painfully, he disentangled the possessed from the possessor. The demonic essence screamed as it was torn from flesh, sucked into crystalline vessels Gabriel had prepared, shards of heaven designed to contain what could not be destroyed. And once the possession was broken, Istro ended the rest. The tide turned. The demons' armies dwindled, their illusions faded, their strongholds fell. But not all who fought were angels. Humans, freed from deception, awakened by Gabriel's revelations and steadied by Raphael's light, joined the battle. They guided angelic forces to hidden shrines, exposed buried symbols, tore down altars with their own hands. They were no longer victims, they were warriors. This was not just heaven rescuing earth. This was earth choosing heaven. By twilight, the battlefield had shifted, no longer the seat of darkness. Now, it was a place of decision, and the final confrontation was near. In the distance, at the edge of a broken sky, Sam and Nariman stood, wounded, weakened, but unbowed. Around them, the last of their monstrous children circled, pulsing with stolen strength. This was the last stand, and the angels. They did not hesitate, they did not celebrate. They simply advanced. Because light does not boast, it simply overcomes. Now let us witness what happened when heaven brought the final judgment, and what the fallen said with their last breath. Twilight cloaked the battlefield in a strange stillness, the kind of stillness that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. The hills, once crowned with Sam's fortresses, lay in ruin, their stones glowing faintly with the residue of divine judgment. Rivers ran quiet, winds paused, even the stars seemed to retreat behind the veil of dusk. At the center of it all stood the two who had begun it, Sam and Nariman, no longer cloaked in the forms they had worn among men, no longer draped in stolen robes or veiled by sweet words. Now they stood in their full corrupted glory, towering figures of shadow, flame, and fractured light. They were beautiful once. You could almost see it still, hidden beneath the rage, behind the arrogance. They were angels. They had sung in the high places once. But now, they were hollow echoes of that former splendor. Around them, the last of their twisted offspring gathered. Hybrid beings, part man, part demon, bearing the scars of both. They formed a broken ring, shielding their fallen fathers, growling, weeping, trembling with a rage that wasn't fully theirs. These were not armies anymore. They were remnants. Across from them, the army of light drew near. Michael at the front, his golden aura now softened, not because his strength had faded, but because mercy had taken its place. Raphael beside him, carrying a vial of shimmering liquid, the essence of restoration. Gabriel flanking the other side, holding aloft a crystalline orb pulsing with captured demonic energy. The sphere didn't hum. It ached. It pulsed like a heart longing for closure, and Istro behind them, silent and glowing like the last ember of a dying star, waiting to burn the final memory into the soil. The angels halted, not from fear, from reverence. This moment wasn't just a battle. It was a reckoning. Sam stepped forward. His voice, though diminished, still held an ancient weight. "You've won," he said, "but you haven't ended us." The words floated heavy in the air. "Our kind was here before your world had names," he continued, "and long after your churches crumble into dust, the darkness in men will call us back." Nariman laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You cleanse the land, but not the seed. You think this ends with our defeat?" He gestured to the hybrids. "They are us. Fractured, yes. Broken, perhaps. But in them, we continue." Gabriel stepped forward, the sphere in her hands glowing brighter with each breath the demons took. "Your essence will not return to the wind," she said gently. "It will be contained, redeemed or forgotten, but no longer worshipped." Raphael's eyes shone with compassion, even as he held the vial high. "Your victims will heal," he declared. "The minds you poisoned will find clarity. The blood you spilled will cry out no longer." Sam sneered, but behind the sneer, fear. Because he could feel it now, not defeat. Finality. Michael's voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. "You chose rebellion. You chose to make yourselves gods. But today, your names will be removed from the mouths of men, not by force. By choice." He turned, not to the demons, but to the humans standing behind him. Farmers, warriors, mothers, orphans, people who had once bowed to Sam's commands, who had once heard Nariman in dreams. Now they watched with tear-streaked faces and steady hands. Michael raised his sword, not in anger, but in absolution. "This ends." And then it did. The four angels moved as one, light, fourfold, full, final, converged around Sam and Nariman. They didn't scream. They exhaled, as if some deep part of them had waited for this moment all along. The hybrids collapsed, not dead, but freed. Their demonic essence, drawn out like breath, spiraled into the orb Gabriel held. She closed it, sealed it. Raphael rushed to the fallen bodies, pouring the contents of his vial across their hearts. Some stirred, some cried out. Some simply breathed, truly, for the first time. Istro, the last to act, placed his hand upon the ground. The earth shook, once, and then was still. The scars of battle closed, stones reassembled, the air cleared. The war was over. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Michael turned to the people and said words that would become a song. Let this not be remembered as the fall of the wicked, but the rise of the righteous. And the people wept, not because of sorrow, but because they remembered who they were. And when light reminds you of your name, even ashes become sacred. So the angels left, not in triumph, but in peace. The sky grew quiet once more, but it was no longer a cage. It was a canvas, waiting to be painted with the stories of those who would rise, not by might, not by fear, but by truth. And you who have heard this story, know this. The war may be over, but the choice remains. Because darkness doesn't need chains to return. It only needs your silence. So speak, shine, and never forget. Light always keeps its promises. The ashes had barely cooled when the stories began. At first, they were whispers, shared by firelight, murmured in temples, painted on stone walls where only the brave dared look. Stories of the angels who descended, of the fortress that crumbled in a single breath, of a guardian who was never good, and a prophet whose visions had poisoned kings. But like all true stories, they didn't remain whispers for long. They became songs, they became scripture, and eventually, they became warnings. The elders would tell the children, beware of those who promise protection, but demand your soul. Others would remind their neighbors, not all dreams come from heaven. Some are seeds of control, not comfort. Still the scars remained, not on the land, for Raphael had healed the earth, but in memory. In culture, in the subtle ways people glanced at the sky with both awe and caution, in the way they touched altars, not to worship blindly, but to remember. Because Sam and Nariman were gone, but not forgotten. And therein lay the final curse. Before the light consumed them, before their names were pulled from the tongues of men, they spoke one last truth. Our children carry pieces of us. It wasn't a metaphor. Among the ruins of their corrupted temples, traces of their essence remained. Not in form, but in echo, in instinct. In systems that once bowed to their will, still stumbling forward like a beast too dumb to know its master is dead. And in certain bloodlines, certain gifts, certain dreams that refused to fade. A child would be born with eyes too knowing. Another would speak in tongues never taught. And in the corners of the world, dark cults began to stir. Silent watchers who remembered too much and forgot too little. You see, evil doesn't need to rule to remain. It only needs to be remembered wrongly, worshipped in disguise, invited unknowingly. And while heaven had sealed the breach, while the prison had been reforged, there remained one gate that even angels could not close, the human heart. That gate opens not with magic or rituals, but with choice, with compromise, with hunger for control, with fear. This was the warning passed down, not from Michael, not even from Gabriel, but from the humans who had seen the truth and lived to tell it. Beware the guardian who demands your silence. Beware the prophet who flatters your pride. Beware the God who looks too much like your reflection. But this is not a tale of despair. Because light had not merely won, it had awakened. Something shifted in the spirit of mankind that day. The people had not just been rescued, they had participated, they had chosen. And once a people choose truth over fear, even if just once, that truth lives forever. Villages once divided by suspicion became sanctuaries of trust. Craftsmen once forced to build instruments of torture now carved symbols of renewal. Scholars who once wrote lies for demons began chronicling hope for generations to come. They remembered the names of the angels, not just as warriors, but as reminders. Michael, the just. Gabriel, the revealer. Raphael, the healer. Istro, the finisher. Their names were not worshipped, but honored. Etched into stone not for veneration, but for direction. And in the hearts of those who survived, one truth remained. The battle between darkness and light is not fought in the heavens alone. It is fought in every act of kindness when cruelty is easier. In every confession when silence feels safer. In every stand for truth when the crowd demands convenience. And perhaps that is the greatest victory of all. Because even though Sam and Nariman are gone, even though their fortress lies in ruin and their followers scattered, the temptation they represented remains. The promise of control, the illusion of peace without righteousness, the comfort of lies. But now we know. We've seen. We remember. So, dear listener, as the stars shine above you, no longer trembling, no longer falling, ask yourself this. Will you guard your heart as heaven once guarded its gates? Will you stand when fear tells you to kneel? Will you remember the light when the shadow wears a friendly face? Because this story, it is not just theirs, it is yours. And it is not over. So if this story stirred something in you, if it awakened a memory you didn't know you carried, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Speak it. Let others remember too. Like this video. Comment your thoughts. And subscribe, because the next battle may not be fought in ancient skies, but in the choices we make today. And you are not alone in that fight. You are never alone, because light always finds a way back. Some say the battle is over. That what needed to be done has been done, and now the world can rest. But we both know better, don't we? You've felt it too, that quiet tension, the stillness that lingers not in the sky but behind the eyes of those around you. In the choices they make, in the words they whisper when no one is listening. The war didn't end when the fortress fell. It changed shape. It moved from mountaintops to marketplaces, from demonic shrines to boardrooms, from altars soaked in blood to glowing screens and polished stages. The darkness doesn't always return with horns and fire. It returns in subtleties, in comforts that cost your soul, in truth, diluted just enough to go unnoticed. And yet, so many still wait for the next great shaking of the heavens, the next sign, the next angel to appear with sword drawn. They look up, hoping, but the truth is, heaven isn't looking for spectators. It's looking for torchbearers, because the greatest rebellion now is remembering who we are, who we were meant to be. Before fear took the throne, before the lie wore robes and demanded worship, before the fallen called themselves saviors and asked for sacrifices in exchange for protection they never meant to give. The memory of what happened above us and within us must not fade. Because when it fades, history repeats, but not with angels and demons. With neighbors, with families, with systems we call progress that trade integrity for efficiency and call it necessary. So ask yourself, what have you accepted just because it was easier? What voices have you followed because they were louder, not truer? What powers have you handed over in the name of convenience, cloaked in the illusion of safety? They say no one remembers the prisoners once the war ends. But these prisoners, they wanted to be remembered, not as villains, no, as gods, as legends, as eternal, but that too is a lie. They wanted to live on not through legacy, but through influence, through the seeds they planted in minds willing to trade light for shadow. That's the part of the story no one tells you. That evil doesn't care about being feared. It only cares about being followed, quietly, willingly, while you believe you're still the one holding the map. And so this isn't just the end of their story, it's the start of yours. You who watched, you who listened, you who stayed with me through every twist, every truth unearthed. You are now part of the remembering. You carry the light they tried to extinguish, not the kind that blinds, but the kind that reveals. The kind that exposes false peace, challenges comfortable chains, and dares to ask the questions no one else will. That light does not need an army, it needs a spark. And maybe, just maybe, that spark is you. You've heard their names. You've seen what they did. And now, more importantly, you know how they worked. You've seen their masks, their methods, their mirrors. So here is my final invitation. Don't leave this story here. Take it with you, into the way you see the world, into the way you question what's being sold to your soul, into the conversations that matter, into the silent choices that shape generations. Because stories like these were never meant to end. They were meant to awaken. And if you felt that spark, even just a flicker, then let's not stop here. There's more to uncover, more layers buried beneath tradition and myth. More whispers in the wind that have yet to be translated. This channel is not just a place of storytelling. It's a refuge for the curious, the brave, the unafraid to wonder. So I ask you, not as a creator but as a fellow witness, like this video if it made you think. Share it if it made you feel. And subscribe if you're ready to walk deeper into the mysteries they never wanted you to see. Because this isn't just entertainment, it's remembrance. And remembrance is resistance. Thank you for walking this road with me. The next chapter is already stirring. I'll see you there.